All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to get started here in just a moment, but it looks like we've got some people trickling in here. So great to see everybody. And just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Matt Sloane. I'm the CEO and founder of Skyfire Consulting. Today here with us, we have, just going down the line here, we've got Mike Rogers. So Mike is our new Director of Public Safety and Training. So Mike, welcome. So glad to have you with us. We also have Mike Briant here, who is our newly installed Chief Security Officer. So Mike, pleasure to have you here with us as well.
Glad to be here.
And Officer Cunningham, who hails from Atlanta Police Department, runs their UAS program there. So Jimmy, I'm sorry, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump right in here. Just because we just made the announcement last week that both of the mics will be joining us full time here. So I just wanted to start by doing a little introduction of you guys. So if you want to kick us off, Mike Rogers, and just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and what you're specializing in and what brought you here to Skyfire.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, it's great to be here finally. Just retired after about 22 years with the FBI, and the last 5 years of that period was helping develop the FBI's drone program. So I had a pretty good range from response stuff to surveillance and just about everything in between. Prior to that, I was a special agent. I flew aircraft as a pilot in command for the surveillance programs, had some tactical background and some investigative background. And so have a pretty good mix of what's going on out there on the pulse of public safety. Prior to that, I was a police officer, had a little bit of Air Force time. So I think in a position to hopefully bring some of that experience and to the Skyfire team. And so in the new position, Director of Public Safety, I think out of the gate, what we're trying to do is take the training that you've done here at Skyfire, and just find any kind of gaps out there in public safety, any way we can improve that training, and push that forward and make that program a little bit stronger, and bring on some new partners and try to find basically established best practices. So that's really the goal, is to sort of a standard of excellence, the standardization and training and best practices and training to help out all the public safety agencies that we can.
Awesome. Well, we are very thrilled to have you aboard and look forward to all the great stuff we're going to do together. So glad to have you here. And for what it's worth, Mike and I are actually sitting across the same room from one another. He's over there. So I don't think we're fooling anybody. But we are actually, we put him to work on day one. So we're actually out here outside of Philadelphia doing some training today. So but we couldn't get everybody on the same camera. So, well, thanks, Mike, for that. I appreciate it. Mike Briant, welcome aboard officially as our Chief Security Officer. We've been working together now for 2 years, I guess, right? So
it's coming up on 2 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been an awesome relationship. Really brought a lot of background and tactics to what we're already doing. So you could just kind of share your background a little bit and what you're looking to do here.
Sure. Over the last 8 years, I founded a company called Skydis Group, and we specialized in basically an all hazards risk management program, everything from physical security up to reputation protection, and some of your more sensitive facilities and personnel. We provided a lot of security services for those. Prior to that, I was deployed all through Southwest Asia, all through the Middle East on behalf of the State Department for one of the contracting companies. So I worked on a couple of high threat teams, worked on some training programs, and I really got a chance to really see what's actually going on, got a pulse of what was happening out there. And as the commonality that we had was the drone usage that we had access to when we were deployed was something that, as you and I talked about, we just simply didn't see that back here in the States, and that just seemed like a natural fit for that. Prior to that, I was a police officer in Atlanta, Georgia for quite a long time. I used to run the training program for those teams, for our department agency. And then prior to my law enforcement career, I was in the U.S. Marines, specializing in airfield security.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you with us as well today, too, and just on board in general. And our last guest is Jimmy Cunningham. Save the best for last. Cunningham is the director of the UAS program at Atlanta PD. And he's been a client of ours and a friend for a couple of years now, and we've been kind of working with him to get their program up and running. And then at some point, a switch flipped, and you stopped calling as much to need our help, and you were off on your own running the thing. So tell us a little bit about APD's program and kind of how you guys employ the use of aircraft.
So yes, I lean on you a lot, right? So the thanks to you and Skyfire, you guys have been a tremendous help in helping APD get its program going, right? So the program has roughly been going about a year and a half now. And today I can say it's a successful program because of the things that you showed me and taught me, right? Right now this year we're around 250 call outs, right? So and that's not including all the protests that we've been doing here in Atlanta, right? So we've been utilized quite a bit throughout the whole department. We're not just centralizing to one specific location. We help the whole city, whether it's SWAT, narcotics, accident reconstruction, inspections, whatever the need is for a drone, they'll definitely reach out to us and we'll get out there and make it happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us as well, and thanks for all your nice comments about us. You definitely picked it up and ran with it. So, well, what's cool about the panel that we have here today, Cunningham, you've done it from a local and in some cases state level. Mike, you've used aircraft from a federal level, and then Mike Briant, you were on an international basis for some high threat stuff overseas. So we've all used them in different applications. But the common theme, I think, between all of us is training. And so, this is obviously what Mike Rogers and I are out doing today. And it's something that we do quite a bit of. I think we've done, probably 200 classes at this point for various agencies, but nobody quite has the exact formula down yet. And so we wanted to talk today about some of the best practices, some of the things that we're all doing at the various levels to sort of further the information around training for public safety programs. So, I'm just there's a couple of things that we hear a lot from our clients, questions and things like that. So I'm just gonna kind of go through them one at a time, and then we can use that as a jumping off point. But the first one we get very regularly is, how often should I have my people training? So first of all, let me preface that by saying you should be doing recurrent training a lot. We have some agencies who feel like, oh, I got a drone and we did our class, cool, we're good, now we can just go off and do it. And then you don't pick it up for 6 months, then that's not a skill set you're going to really remember. So let's talk about Jimmy. Let's start with you. Just kind of how are you? I mean, I know you are primarily the drone team for APD, but you've set up a lot of really great training stuff at headquarters. So talk to me a little about how often you're doing training and are going to be as you bring people on board.
So I can say I'm in a fortunate situation, right? That to where I have the luxury of training every day if I choose to, right? I know it's a lot of departments out there that can't do that. But with the call outs and me trying to get training in, I try to train at least twice a week. Whether I'm doing it before I serve a warrant or I'm doing it afterwards. But flying a drone is a personal skill, just like shooting, right? If you don't do it, you're going to lose that skill. And with my training, figure eights is really big on my training, right? That's the first thing I do when I get out there and start training. And it's not figure eights where you just get in the open air and you're flying in a figure eight, right? It's getting inside, a 6x6 box, putting cones around it, and then putting 2 cones inside of that, and controlling and making the drone do exactly what it is that you want to do, that you want it to do. Because with a lot of indoor flying that I do, I need to make sure that I'm able to put that drone exactly where it is that I want it to go, right? And that's making sure that you're real precise with those sticks. A lot of people might want to put it on tripod mode so that the drone will move real slow if they're flying indoors. But I think you're hindering yourself by doing that, right? You need to be able to adjust those sticks and move that drone exactly how you want to do it. And with that, I've been fortunate enough to get a NIST course that I'm able to utilize here at headquarters as well. So between the figure eights and the NIST course, those are pretty much the main things that I do if I'm not actually flying indoors.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to come back to the NIST course here in a minute. Mike Rogers, I wanted to ask you, you've got a different set of problems. So Cunningham could train every single day if he wanted to. You had, dozens of field offices and lots of drones out there. So how did you guys approach training from a top-down perspective, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we had a variety of platforms, a lot of pilots with different skill sets. In the end, the agency had to set minimum standards, and the minimum standards are really honestly about liability. As far as competency, that's an independent decision. So we always used to train folks to a minimum level of competency and say, now you're licensed to go out and learn this thing for real. So the training was really, as agents, as adults, you were expecting them to be competent when they were called out. So you left it to them. If some people could get by, there actually are some people who get by, who do once a week, once every other week, and they're okay. Some people needed to be on that much more consistently. They weren't able to operate unless they were hitting that thing at least once a week, twice a week. So in a lot of sense, we left it up to them. We did have minimum standards on the agency, but the more sophisticated the platform, the more training they needed to do, the more time they needed to put in. And it's a huge common theme amongst all the agencies I've dealt with that very rarely is a drone position a full-time position. It's considered auxiliary duty. Even in DoD, they're still fighting that fight a little bit. So when you're talking about a sophisticated system, a fixed wing system or a heavy system, it really, those guys should be hitting it at least a couple times a month in training, and more importantly, operating with it. Operating is when you really learn about your competency level is under a little bit of stress. So, and I think we'll talk more, but basically inducing some of that stress in training is an important part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, one of the things that you hit on that's super important is, the basic training is really just a license to go out and learn more about the system. And so, Mike, Briant, I wanted to bring you in on that too. I mean, one of the things, we quickly realized when we teamed up is, my team's really great about the basic drone stuff, talking about the theory and airspace and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to actually operationalizing that knowledge, it's a different ballgame. So tell me about, how you sort of approached when we developed these tactics classes together, how you sort of approached operationalizing that theoretical knowledge.
Yeah, sure. What I looked at is at the end of the day, the drones, it's a tool basically for the guy on the ground to make sound decisions that can get his team or whatever the mission that he's trying to accomplish to get done safely. And what I looked at when we were developing the tactical training part of that is how do we develop that communication program so that the guys on the ground who may not actually see exactly what the drone's feed is, but can actually communicate with the drone pilot so that everybody's on the same page. Because, we see this time and time again, as you mentioned earlier, and as Mike mentioned, that sometimes it's an auxiliary position. Well, the person who is flying that drone may not have any knowledge of what the tactical uses are for. And as you guys know, that where I'm at in the field and where the drone operator's at, those two positions are distinctly different. So if you're trying to describe where something's at, or how do you get resources into that particular location, it's significantly different. So, for me, it was about establishing that good communication program so that everybody's all on the same page, and then making sure that everyone understands kind of what the true tactical applications for what the drone can do. And we're all huge fans of drones, but you also got to understand what are the drones' possibilities, but also what are its limitations, and also what are the pilot's limitations, and what is the actual team? Is a drone sometimes, is this the best option? And a lot of times it absolutely is, but in other times you've got to sit back and look at, okay, would I get a better view from a higher viewpoint, or would it be better, do I need to get something close in? And then teaching the end user those differences and how to apply them correctly, and just basically to maximize the use.
Yeah, so that's a really important point you bring up too, especially, we've seen where teams, although everybody's a law enforcement officer, they have different areas of specialty.
Mm-hmm.
So Cunningham, I mean, your background is in SWAT. So you're used to being in the most high threat situations. You speak the language and have done the training and been in the stack yourself. So why is that? I mean, how have you found integrating this into tactical applications, whether it be SWAT versus scene reconstruction, which is a totally different sort of threat profile?
So with this, right, the drone is beneficial for the team because it's all about safety, right? Safety comes first, right? And with our SWAT team, I mean, we're a tier 1 SWAT team. And so we have a lot of equipment to utilize, right? So it was just another tool that we put on the tool belt. And, you know, with the robots that we have and able to utilize a drone with the robot, I mean, it keeps our operators out of harm's way. I mean, granted, you're still going to have to go in, but we're able to get eyes on what's going on inside before an operator has to step foot into that location.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and the training has to apply to all different situations too. So it's maybe sometimes you're training on indoor tactics, sometimes you're training on scene reconstruction.
Yes, with that. So I mean, even being in SWAT, right? You just don't have one weapon. You have a arsenal of weapons, right? You got to make sure you're proficient on everything or whatever it is that you pick up, right? So the same thing with the drone. When they call for the drone, you got to be ready for whatever it is situation that's.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there's a certain set of different mission profiles in the local level. At the federal level, Mike, what how do you? I mean, is your UAS teams, were they all hazards? I mean, were they ready for anything, or were they specifically cloistered into the hostage rescue versus just evidence collection, things like that?
Yeah, it was actually, they were all different capabilities. When we looked at, like Jimmy said, it's a tool. And so we were trying to find the right tool. So we sat down with each of those response programs, whether it was SWAT, evidence program, bomb techs, technical agents. And we said, what do you need the drone to do? How can the drone help you? And then we went out and found the drone that was right for that particular platform, that was right for that program. And then once we got the program, then we had to sit down and have a further conversation about how do we want to, at what level do these people need to be competent, and what mission do they need to accomplish? And so you have an initial school, kind of like we're doing here with County of Delaware, where you're training them the basics of flying a drone and FAA and codes and that. And then from there, it's more, you've now got a baseline pilot. Now you're going to take that person and teach them the tactical application of what they're trying to do. And really flying the drone is about 50% of the flying the drone. The rest is about finding the right sensor. It's about how to employ the sensor. It's about how to use all the functionality of the drone, which most of them are underutilized in most cases I'm seeing. And then once you capture that, what do you do with the video? How do you push it? How do you get it to the people that make decisions, and how do you store it, and how do you manipulate it? So there's quite a bit of training and there's quite a bit of expertise that's learned well beyond the initial school and the ability to put the drone in the air. So we basically looked at those programs and we thought the best system and the best sensor in the world in some cases for that particular application. So our interior drone pilots, for instance, flying for SWAT, that was an indoor fight tool only. They didn't fly outside and they didn't do evidence reconstruction. Our evidentiary folks, they were experts on how to use the imagery and how to collect the imagery, and they did not fly indoors. So we tried to make those individual lines of training.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about specific tactics for training. So Cunningham, you mentioned the NIST course. Do you want to kind of give us a little bit of background on what that is and how you're using it for your training?
So correct me if I'm wrong. This is an acronym for National Standards.
National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I probably even got it wrong.
Sorry, Adam. Right. No, I appreciate that. So with the courses that they make, I mean, it goes from robots to drones to whatever, right? So, and I'm sure the course that I have may be different from the course that someone else has, right? And it's just on this particular day that I went to their training, they donated all that equipment to APD. So the type of equipment that I have is almost like a spiral, right? You're having to locate different objects in a bucket as you manipulate the drone around a post, so to speak, right? And you're moving in an upward or downward motion. So it's making you utilize the stick, as well as, they was able to make, a window so that I'm able to fly through a window structure or a door structure if I can't find an indoor location to fly. So it's about 3 or 4 different obstacles to get into. That's part of it right there, right? And you can utilize these things with the Mavics, or you can utilize them with the Matrice, being able to zoom into the location and look inside those targets, right? So they have an array of different training mechanisms that you can use to help utilize those skills or build your skills.
Yeah, and I just pulled a picture that I just grabbed to kind of show everybody what we're talking about. So a couple of different test essentially like fixtures that you would put up so you can fly around them and see the stuff that's inside the box there. I'm just pulling up a couple of others here too, so I can give a different look here. So Mike, is this something that Mike Rogers, is this something that you guys employed as well at the federal level, and did you find it to be useful?
Yeah, I think it's a great setup. I mean, I consider this sort of the last piece of unfinished business I had there, which was the search for the perfect training course. NIST has done a lot of work on this, and they've got a great standard. These guys they're experts at what they're doing. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that, but we certainly can add to it. The NIST thing is all about repetitiveness, doing it at the same time, the same way, and timing it, and getting the data from that. And so to take what they're doing, that baseline course, and then to manipulate it, like Jimmy was saying, you put in obstacles, you put in windows and doors, and you put other things, you change altitudes, you do what you need to do to adjust it for your training. We can take, here at Skyfire, we can take that course, we can manipulate it, and we can kind of build a better mousetrap.
Yeah, and what's great about the course is all the plans are available for free on this website. So we can make sure that we get a link to that posted. So the materials are very inexpensive. It's 2x4s and buckets and screws. So any department can build exactly to the standards, or like you said, build something to your specific needs. So that's something that any of you guys can do at your own departments. Taking it past the NIST course, Mike Briant, I want to talk about some of the tactical stuff that we've done. We had some at our conference. We've done a bunch out in the field as well. What are, taking it out of the sort of the theoretical and putting it into the real world application? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. I am a huge fan of scenario-based training, giving the people that we work with an actual mission to accomplish. And that's where you discover where your actual strengths and weaknesses are at. And as Roger's referenced, stress is basically the best teacher that you have out there, and you're going to find out exactly where you're at with it. The other thing is that we talked earlier about making sure that you have good communications. The communication needs for someone who's doing an accident reconstruction scene is significantly different from a tactical team that's making entry into a structure or building, or even for EMS or fire personnel as they're making entry into the building. Latency in communication, on a traffic reconstruction, that's not necessarily a critical failure. However, latency in communication while performing an entry that may have some deadly repercussions. And so that's one of the things that we want to be able to impart to people, is understanding the difference between the tactical operations from your standard simple, it's not necessarily simple, but just your drone piloting operations, why that is such an important element. We like to develop scenarios that are based on whatever that agency's or emergency services platform that's consistent with what they do. And then, you want to throw a couple of outliers out there, because I think we're all public safety veterans here. We can tell you that no day is standard, and you're going to run into some things that you could say that would never, ever happen. But in fact, it does. So, we want to make sure that when we develop these programs for people, that they have the ability to execute kind of the no matter what, no matter when, kind of with an eye toward the no fail principle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, just is a little bit of a tangent here, but I think it's important to point out, is that operating under a certificate of authorization, the FAA actually delegates the authority to the public safety agency to decide what their training program is, and there is no specific certification that you need to get. Now, of course, the 107 certification does exist, but that's really only the beginning. I mean, that just teaches you the theory, and then actually getting out there and practicing it. So, Cunningham, I want to talk to you, and then we'll come to you, Mike Rogers, to talk about, you were sort of delegated that authority by the FAA to design your training program. That's a double-edged sword, because there's not a lot of guidance out there as well, too. So, how did you kind of figure out what was the right approach for training?
Come on, you know the answer to that. I lean on you guys, right? So
we don't have all the answers either.
right. So if you don't have the answer, best believe I don't have the answer, right? So a lot of the guidelines came from you guys, right? You and Ben helped me out a lot as trying to get an outline on what should be done, right? And then from there, is making sure that, you know, I document all my training and make sure that I'm getting it in at least once a week.
Yeah, and Mike, I mean, you started from scratch as well too, I would imagine. So how did you sort of evaluate the development of that?
Well, yeah, every poet is a thief, right? So we went around and we talked to a lot of folks, and we pulled what we thought were the you know, the right fit. So initially we required a 107. We thought that was a good commercial standard for everybody to walk in the door and show commitment. And then we required that they were, you know, trained with a very basic course, drone theory, dynamics, all that, et cetera. And then we got a specific course. So whether it was a manufacturer course or whether it was our internally developed course, they were trained specific to the platform and the mission they're going to fly. And again, that was all worked in conjunction with the user, whether it was a SWAT team or the ERT team. Once all that was completed, then it was recurrent training and follow-on training, and that was all documented as part of their training package. And then additionally, we identified people who seemed to have a much better knack, and the guys that were calling a lot with the right questions, and people that were pretty committed to it in each program. And then we'd make them train the trainers. And once we developed train the trainers, for us, we had a logistic problem trying to train across the entire nation. It created an opportunity for us to build a cadre of some pretty sharp pilots and let them kind of retrain the next generation, going forward. So it's now spiraling, further and further out to where we have more and more competent people training people. And we're able to handle a much better value.
So let me ask you, one of the things that I wanted to kind of briefly bring up, and this was actually a suggestion that came from our friend Pete Acevedo from the FAA when we did our conference there in Atlanta, was training on adverse events. So trying to figure out lost links and lost line of sight, things that might happen in the real world. A couple of the tactics that we used, for losing, quote unquote, losing line of sight is, we would turn the pilot around, and the visual observer would keep an eye on the drone to make sure we were not going to hit anything for real. But training on what it's like to fly like that, taking the iPad off the controller and losing that visualization. How important do you think training for actual adverse events versus just training for the scenarios and then hoping for the best?
It's critically important. Like I said, the first getting the initial training done is not even maybe not even 50% of the fight. It's then making them pretty competent. And as you do more operations and as you do more training, particularly stress-induced training, you get more competent. Not only to handle, there's no way you're going to predict every event, but as any police officer knows, you have to run through a lot of stuff in your mind to have at least an initial response, a proper initial response to all these adverse conditions. And then from there, you have the confidence through the training. And that's the big thing is when you start doing more adverse training, it's kind of, you don't know what you don't know, and you start realizing how much you don't know. You start training towards those eventualities, and you start getting a much better level of confidence to troubleshoot. So for us, the big deal was on a lot of these systems, it was some sort of electronic malfunction that caused the loss of link, or something in the software would go down. And it gave us confidence over time that, okay, the airplane's not going to fall out of the sky. Let's work through this as a team. Let's troubleshoot, and you generally can get to a competent answer, whether it's putting the thing down somewhere, whether it's bringing it back to you, whether it's launching that second aircraft. And you find people that the more they train in those scenarios, the more confident they have, the more ready they are. Those people are the ones that have a second aircraft prepped and ready, and the batteries ready to go and warming, because they know there's going to be a failure, or at least they assume there's going to be a failure in the first flight somehow. So you're basically cutting your losses over time. So the training is hugely important. We were fortunate we had restricted airspace, so we could do some things in that restricted airspace that some folks don't have the opportunity to do. And it's really, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's developing some of those common public safety scenarios that you can train to that are outside the box that would be great to start making a standard form of training.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mike, Briant, we talked to a lot of agencies. You've talked to a lot of police departments about integrating drones into their programs. How much hesitation do you see from the outside? And then Jimmy, I'll ask you from the inside. How much hesitation do you see to really put the effort and time and frankly money into recurrent training? Or you see a lot of people that are just like, all right, I did the initial, we're good.
Well, the one thing that with all public safety entities, budget constraints are what everyone's afraid of. And, as we talked about earlier, a lot of times that's an auxiliary position, so they don't they're not flying as often as they should, simply because they're tasked with other jobs within their mission. It's just what we're running into. And, we were just down in Bartow County. They recognized that they needed a drone program desperately. But by the time, I think we talked to them, it was a few months ago, but by the time they get involved with it, that time and that latency comes with it. They had several, operations that they could have used a drone, and they realized, hey, we really do need to get this. But then it's a matter of, okay, now that we have it, what do we do with it? And I kind of want to touch a little bit on what Mike was saying a little earlier. In your training program, we highly recommend that you train to your failure point. What I mean by that is that you train to the point where you're actually failing at trying to achieve whatever your goal is. Because if you're consistently doing the same basic maneuvers over, you're going to give yourself kind of a false sense of actual competency, when realistically you need to get to the point where, hey, that line of sight's gone. I don't know how to fly within this particular set of parameters. You don't know that till you figure out where your actual failure point's at. But as far as agencies getting involved, everybody wants a drone program. Everybody knows they need a drone program. It's a matter of getting your elected officials, and sometimes your people who run the budgets, to fully get on board and get the buy-in with it, because that's what we actually see as kind of the what I would call kind of the hiccup point. But I think we can say without fail, with every agency that we worked with, as soon as that drone program comes online, it's kind of how did we do this before without the drones? So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Cunningham, how much, obviously you're in a great spot because you've been given the opportunity to run the drone program as your sole job. How much resistance do you get though when you're like, I got to do training, or I got to take myself out of the mix for the day to go take a class somewhere? I mean, is that something that you found a lot of support for? And as you start to bring more people on the team, I mean, how big of an importance does training have in that?
So, like I said earlier, with my situation, I've definitely been in a blessed situation to where, I have the support of the chief on down, right? From the chief, the deputy chief, the assistant chief, all the way down. And training really isn't an issue. They actually want me to train to make sure that, not just that I'm on top of my game, but us as a unit, we're on top of the game, right? So, dealing with the Southeast, we want to make sure that, we're setting a good standard. And if anybody needs to know how, they're coming to APD to get that information.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's super important because, I mean, you guys really, there's a lot of agencies around the Atlanta area who have done a lot of great stuff with their programs, and you guys are really a shining example, I think, on the hill of how you can integrate this properly. So what have you found, obviously APD is a very large department, big city. Have you found, how have you found the challenges of like reminding everybody that you guys are there to help? I mean, do you feel like commanders remember to call you to do some of these things, or you feel like, hey, I could have been there, how is that going down?
So at the beginning, it was, getting the word out was a little, like I say, it's challenging, but it just took a while for the word to get out there, right? That, AP has a drone program. I mean, it was fairly new, right? But once the word got out there, people realized that, hey, we need, on every situation, they feel like they need to have the drone out there because they see how useful it is, right? And once you have one supervisor buy into it, and then he calls the drone out, and then everybody else see it, like, hey, we need to make sure we get the drone out for this call.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that internal sales pitch, I think it is one of the most important parts that we've seen in a lot of programs, is just reminding people that you're there and you can help and be present.
I mean, it also helps with on the city side as well, right? I mean, with the air unit, everyone's first thought is to call the air unit, and with the air unit is very, very useful for the department. But if it's something small, like looking for, I don't know, a lost child or something, right? The drone could be a cost-efficient alternative to the man unit, right? So we're helping the unit that's requesting this, and at the same time we're saving the city money.
Did you find, Mike Rogers, that was a decision point for you guys? I mean, like, obviously you guys have a large fleet of manned aircraft as well. I mean, was it one versus the other, or they worked in concert, or how did you?
Well, you know, initially it was kind of a threat to the manned aircraft, and there was this concern that, hey, it's cheaper to fly drones, and we're going to use drones instead of airplanes. But the types of operations we were doing, each platform has a benefit, and you layer it in. So we looked at it as a complete program, an aviation asset, and we layered in the specialty. For instance, if it was a surveillance or an event where it's going to be moving down range, then you use manned aircraft because they're better for movement. If a situation where it was noise sensitive or it was weather, there was horrible weather, then we would bring drones in and use, you know, weatherized drones at low altitudes. So we would basically send requests to aviation, and aviation would assess it based on the need of what the ground. Everybody's going to ask for what they want. They want a drone, they want a plane, they want a helicopter. We asked them to just ask us for what you need as an end result, and we'll put the right tool in there, the right platform in there. So we kind of integrated them.
That's such a great way to approach it too. Like, what goal are you trying to achieve here, and then let us look at what the best resource is for it. Not necessarily the cheapest, but what is going to be the most efficient resource.
Yep, because they've got pluses and minuses each, of course.
Mike, I wanted to ask you about post-certification, because that's obviously a big deal in the law enforcement community. For those of you who aren't aware, our classes are Georgia post-certified already, with a lot of help from your team. Talk to me about, you know, are there different budgets for post-certified training, or like what is the importance of that?
Sure. In Georgia post-certification, it's a pretty big deal because your post-credit hours, not only do you get the certification that you need to actually operate and use the aircraft, but you also get post-training hours, which are more or less continuing education classes, and that goes toward maintaining your certifications as a police officer. There are also different levels of funding and grants that are available for a lot of the training out there. And so if you're looking for a solution as to far as getting your drone program up and available, one of the things that you can look at is say, hey, look, the courses that Skyfire is offering, they are post-certified. Definitely in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, a post-certification also carries weight with other post-certification bodies in other states. I know Florida has the FBLE, Florida Bureau of Law Enforcement. They're certification bodies, but if I'm not mistaken, I think post-certification carries over with it. And just for those of you who don't know, what that means is that the courses meet a specific standard for law enforcement training, and it's not something that's just cobbled together and just kind of thrown out into the wind. To be honest with you, I think making sure that you've got some type of training that has some type of certification with it, it goes quite a long way, not only on your ability to operate the course, but also, you know, public safety and law enforcement in particular. It's a litigious world today, and having the ability to say, hey, we've met these standards, they fit these criteria, it goes a long way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's one of the things where the industry is sort of lacking is true standards. And of course, NIST is really working hard to establish those so that we can train to that standard. And on the fire side, the NFPA guidelines or give us something to train to. But you know, in the COA, actually, it doesn't have any specificity. So is that? Just wanted to kind of throw that out to any of you guys. You know, I mean, is that something you found issue with? You know, there's no box to check because there's very little certification out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, getting the basic COA and then your Part 107 certifications. Those are good. Those are great. Hell, I ain't gonna say good. I mean, they're actually great certifications to have. At least, you know, job one is to understand what the capability of the aircraft is and where you can and cannot operate it. That goes a heck of a long way. But you know, how we're getting the official NIST certification, the post certifications, all of those combined into one spot, it increases your capability and also kind of lowers your exposure to any type of you know, unintended consequences of your operations, including you know, some legal challenges.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely important. And I think, you know, I'm sort of done with official questions here. So if any of you guys in the audience have questions, please fire them up. I would say, you know, the one take home that I think everybody should get from this is that, you know, training is absolutely critical. Just like you're not going to use a firearm or a taser or drive a fire truck without some kind of training. It's even more important to do it, I think, on the unmanned aircraft side. And knowing that going into it too, because as I said a couple of times now, a lot of people go into a program thinking, as long as I get enough money to get my drone in my initial training class, then I'm good forever. And that's just simply not the case. I mean, there's going to be equipment updates and new batteries you're going to need, but on top of that, you're going to need to do recurrent training as well too. So I'll ask each of you to kind of give us a final thought there. So we'll start with you, Rogers, if you want to, any last words you want to impart to the audience here.
I just want to say I'm just glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I think there's a lot of great things ahead. I think some of the things that Skyfire's done over the last year have put them put us in a great position to do exactly what we're talking about right now, and that is go seek these best practices, seek the standardization, and kind of build some of these scenarios into these training events. So look forward to trying to make that happen and chasing the better, like I said, make the better mousetrap.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Cunningham, anything you want to leave the audience with?
A lot, man. So for those of you that are watching this right now and are weighing the options between Skyfire and some other company, hey, Skyfire will get it done for you, right? They've done a great job for us, and I'm sure they'll do a great job for you too.
No, I really appreciate that, and I didn't pay him. I'm only paying 2 of the 3 people on this webinar. So, but no, I really appreciate that, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with you guys. And I remember when we first went out and we're flying together, and you're like, I don't think I'm ever going to get the hang of this. And then next thing I know, he's off doing 5 warrants a day, and he's like, man, I just flew inside this attic, and you guys are doing some great stuff, and you really put the drones through their paces and found the limits, which I think is so cool. So nice work there, and look forward to continuing to work with you. And Mike Briant, we'll let you wrap us up here. Any last words you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, sure. And Jimmy, thanks for the plug there, buddy. We appreciate that. Yeah, just look at your drone program as kind of a force multiplier. It can do things that you never imagined, and I promise you, the more that you get involved with your drone program, you'll start using it in manners that you never imagined before. And training. That's the key to having a successful drone program. And if we can help you out with anything in the future, let us know.
Appreciate it. Well, Jimmy Cunningham, Mike Briant, Mike Rogers, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you guys all in the audience for joining us as well too. If you have any questions about anything we said today, the webinar is going to be posted, so you can go back and watch it, share with everybody that is interested. You can reach out to us at skyfireconsulting.com. You can, okay, just got a question right here at the last minute. What's the best way to get in touch with Skyfire? I was told to contact Chris Taylor, but I haven't been able to get in touch with him. Best way to email us is just info@skyfireconsulting.com. And Taban, I'll keep an eye out for your email and make sure that it gets up to Chris and the team over there. If you want to email us, info@skyfireconsulting.com, our website, skyfireconsulting.com. You can go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all over the place. So make sure that you get in touch if you have any questions. And we'll also look to put out sort of the best practices from this webinar in a PDF document that you can share. So thank you guys all so much in the audience and on the panel here for joining us, and we will see you next time.